Old photographs are not dead things. People think they are. They believe a photograph is only paper and light, a frozen moment that can never breathe again. But I have spent most of my adult life restoring old photographs, and I can tell you something most people never understand. Photographs remember. They remember hands that held them, rooms where they hung, names whispered over them, tears that fell onto their corners when someone missed the person inside the frame. Sometimes when I work late at night and the rain taps against the windows of my little studio in Edinburgh, I almost feel as though the faces in those photographs are watching me, waiting to be seen properly again. My name is James Holloway. I was 37 years old when the Blackwood photograph came into my possession. At the time, I lived alone above my restoration studio on Victoria Street. The building was narrow and old, wedged between a bookshop and a tailor's shop, with uneven floors and windows that rattled whenever the wind rolled down from the castle. Edinburgh in winter has a way of making loneliness feel ancient. Fog settles between the stone buildings. Street lamps glow like candles behind wet glass. Footsteps echo long after people have passed. It is a beautiful city, but beauty can be cruel when you have no one to share it with. 3 years before this story began, my wife Clara died from an illness that took her slowly. Not violently, not suddenly, slowly, which in some ways is worse, because it gives you time to hope, and then teaches you that hope can be merciless. After she died, I buried myself in work. Restoration became my excuse to keep breathing. Other people brought me damaged memories and I repaired them. Faded wedding portraits, torn military photographs, water-stained family albums, images of children who had grown old and old people who had once been children. I mended everyone else's past because I could do nothing for my own. Clara's photograph remained on my desk, always. A small silver frame beside my lamp. She was smiling in it. Not a posed smile, a real one. The kind she gave me when she caught me worrying over things that didn't matter. Every night before closing, I looked at her and said the same words. Good night, love. I knew it was foolish, but grief makes rituals out of emptiness. The Blackwood photograph arrived on a Wednesday afternoon. The sky outside was dark by 4 o'clock, and rain blurred the windows into gray ribbons. A man named Mr. Elias Greaves brought it in. He was in his late 60s, tall and thin, with the careful manners of someone who had spent his life among old books or old money. He carried the photograph in a flat leather case. I was told you're the best in the city, he said. That depends on who told you. He smiled faintly. My sister. Then your sister is very kind. He placed the case on my counter and opened it. Inside was a large sepia photograph mounted on cracked card. The image showed a family standing before a grand country house. A father, a mother, 3 children. 2 servants positioned at the edge of the frame. Behind them rose a manor of dark stone with tall windows and sharp gables. Even through the damage, the house looked severe, proud, unforgiving. The Blackwood family, Mr. Greaves said. Taken in 1926. Relatives of yours. Distantly. He hesitated. Very distantly. I looked closer. The photograph had suffered badly from age. Water stains along the bottom. Scratches across the sky. A tear near the father's shoulder. Do you want a full restoration? Yes, digital and printed if possible. Of course. He leaned closer. There is one thing. I looked up. What is that? His expression changed slightly. Almost embarrassment. My sister believes there is someone in the upstairs window. I glanced back at the photograph. The manor's second floor contains several windows, most dark and indistinct. I see shadows, I said. She says it's a face. And what do you think? Mr. Greaves gave a small, humorless laugh. I think my sister has always enjoyed ghosts more than is healthy. Something in the way he said it made me pause. You don't believe in that sort of thing. I believe old families create old stories, he replied. And old stories gather dust the same way photographs do. I liked that answer. It sounded like something I might have said myself. After he left, I carried the photograph to my work desk. The rain had worsened. The city outside disappeared into mist and black stone. I scanned the image carefully, then opened the digital file on my computer. At first, everything looked normal. A damaged photograph, a solemn family, a grim old house. Then I zoomed in on the second floor window and saw the face. My fingers froze on the mouse. It was faint, almost swallowed by darkness, but unmistakable. A man stood behind the glass. only part of his face visible, one eye, a cheekbone, a suggestion of a mouth. He seemed to be looking outward, not at the family, at the photographer, or perhaps at whoever viewed the photograph. I leaned closer. The longer I looked, the clearer he became. His expression was difficult to read. Not angry, not frightened. Desperate. That was the word that came to mind. Desperate. I sat back slowly. There was nothing supernatural about discovering a face in an old window. Someone could have been inside the house. A servant. A relative. A trick of light. Still, the image unsettled me. Perhaps because nobody else in the photograph seemed aware of him. The Blackwood family stood stiffly before the manor. The children looked bored. The mother looked tired. The father looked severe. And behind them, hidden in the upstairs window, the man watched. I worked late that night, removing scratches, repairing water damage, balancing contrast. The face in the window remained. Eventually, I decided to clean that area carefully. Mr. Greaves had not asked me to remove the figure, but it seemed likely to be an artifact, a stain, a flaw in the emulsion. So I corrected it. By midnight, the window looked dark and empty. No face, no eye, no watcher. I saved the file, turned off the computer, and locked the studio. Before going upstairs, I paused at Clara's photograph. Good night, love. Her smile reflected softly in the lamplight. I went to bed and dreamed of a man behind glass. The next morning, the first thing I did was open the restored file. I don't know why. Routine, perhaps. Or unease. The image appeared on screen. The Blackwood family stood before their manor. The second-floor window was visible above them, and the face was back. I stared. My breath caught. The correction I had made was gone. The man stood behind the glass, exactly as before. No, not exactly. He was clearer now, both eyes visible, one hand pressed against the window. I opened the saved version history. Nothing. No previous file. No error message. No explanation. I told myself I had accidentally reopened the original scan, so I checked the file name. Restored. Blackwood. Final. My restored file. The face should not have been there. I spent the day trying to prove I had made some ordinary mistake. I rescanned the photograph, compared files, checked backups, repaired the window again, saved multiple versions, printed one copy. Every test led nowhere. By evening, the face remained gone from the files I had corrected. I convinced myself the problem was solved. Then, just before closing, I looked at the printed copy. The man was there, not in the window anymore. He stood behind the glass with his hand raised, as though knocking silently. That night, I didn't say goodnight to Clara. I only stared at the photograph on my desk. For the first time since my wife's death, I felt something stronger than sorrow inside that room. Fear. The next 6 days changed me. Each morning, the photograph was different. Subtly at first. The man's hand moved, his head tilted, his face sharpened. Then his position changed entirely. By the 4th day, he was no longer pressed against the glass. He stood deeper inside the room. By the 5th, the window behind him appeared open. By the 6th, he was leaning out. And on the 7th night, after hours of rain and restless silence, I opened the file one final time. The upstairs window was empty. My heart began to slow. Relief washed over me, until I looked lower, at the family, at the children, at the father with his cold eyes, at the mother with her sorrowful face. And there, standing directly behind them in the garden, was the man from the window. Closer now, clearer now, watching me from inside a photograph that refused to stay still. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was afraid to, because every time I closed my eyes I saw him, the man from the photograph, standing behind the Blackwood family, watching me. The worst part wasn't his appearance. It was his expression. For 7 days I had watched him move, slowly, patiently, from an upstairs window to the garden below, closer and closer. Yet he never looked threatening. He looked desperate, as though he had spent years trying to tell someone something, and had finally succeeded. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely. I returned downstairs to the studio. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The city beyond was wrapped in darkness and fog. Edinburgh always felt older after midnight, older and stranger. The photograph waited on my monitor exactly where I had left it. The Blackwood family stood frozen beneath a pale summer sky from 1926, and behind them stood the man, clearer than ever before. His clothes appeared plain, dark trousers, a worn coat, nothing remarkable. Yet there was something unsettling about the way he occupied the image. He didn't belong there. The family ignored him completely. The servants ignored him. The photographer had apparently ignored him. Only I could see him. Or perhaps, only now could anyone see him. The thought made my stomach tighten. I zoomed closer. The man's face filled the screen. His eyes seemed fixed directly upon mine. Not the camera, not the family. Me. Then I noticed something new. His mouth. It wasn't closed. His lips were slightly parted, as though he were trying to speak. I leaned closer. For several seconds I stared. Then the computer screen flickered. Only briefly. A single pulse of light. When the image stabilized, the man's position had changed. I froze. My heartbeat thundered inside my chest. The movement had been tiny, barely noticeable, but undeniable. One arm had shifted. His hand was now raised slightly higher, reaching toward the camera, toward me. I shut the monitor off immediately. The darkness that followed felt somehow safer. The next morning, I began researching the Blackwood family. If the photograph contained answers, they would likely begin with the people inside it. Old newspaper archives became my second home. Between restoration jobs, I spent hours searching records. Deaths, property sales, marriage announcements, scandals, anything connected to Blackwood Manor. Most of what I found was ordinary. Wealthy families always leave paper trails. Births, funerals, business dealings. But after 3 days, something unusual appeared. A newspaper article from November 1926. The headline read, "Local Servant Missing." The article described the disappearance of a man named Arthur Finch, 32 years old, employed at Blackwood Manor. Vanished without explanation. Police investigated. No evidence emerged. No body was found. The case eventually faded from public attention. One forgotten tragedy among thousands. Yet the accompanying photograph stopped me cold. Arthur Finch. The same face. The same eyes. The same desperate expression. The man inside the photograph. For several moments, I simply stared. My pulse quickened. At last he had a name. Arthur. A missing servant from 1926. A man who vanished and was never found. And somehow, a man moving inside a photograph. I printed every article I could find. By evening, my desk resembled a detective's workspace. Documents covered every surface. Timelines, photographs, notes scribbled in margins. The deeper I looked, the stranger the story became. Arthur had worked for the Blackwoods for nearly 10 years. According to several records, he was well-liked, trusted, reliable. Then one day he disappeared. Without warning, without explanation, and nobody seemed particularly interested in finding him. That detail bothered me, more than it should have. People disappear, but entire communities rarely forget overnight, unless someone wants them to. The realization lingered unpleasantly in my mind. That evening, I opened the photograph again. Arthur had moved. He now stood closer to the foreground. Not much closer, perhaps a few feet, yet the change was unmistakable. I compared it against screenshots from previous days. There could be no doubt. He was approaching, slowly, patiently, crossing the photograph, one impossible step at a time. I should have destroyed it, deleted every file, returned the original to Mr. Greaves. Any sensible person would have. Instead, I kept watching. Curiosity is often stronger than fear, especially when grief has already taught you how much worse life can become. The following week brought new disturbances. Small things at first, harmless things. A door left open. A chair slightly moved. Footsteps overhead when nobody was upstairs. I blamed exhaustion, stress, too many sleepless nights. Until one evening, I heard the footsteps clearly. Not imagined, not distant. Real. They crossed the ceiling directly above my studio. Slow, measured, heavy. Someone walking. I grabbed a flashlight and hurried upstairs. The apartment was empty. Every room, every hallway, Every corner. Nothing. Yet, the footsteps continued. Directly behind me now. I spun around. Silence. Only the ticking of the clock. The experience left me shaken. For the first time, the mystery no longer felt confined to the photograph. It was bleeding into my life. 3 nights later, another discovery changed everything. Hidden inside a university archive, I found a collection of private journals donated by descendants of the Blackwood family. Most contained mundane observations, social events, weather, business affairs. Then I found an entry dated October 1926, written by Eleanor Blackwood, the eldest daughter. The handwriting trembled across the page. Father says we must never speak of Arthur again. Mother cries whenever his name is mentioned. I heard shouting in the cellar that night. Something terrible happened. The sentence ended abruptly. The remaining pages had been torn out. My hands shook. The cellar. Not a disappearance, not an accident. Something worse. A terrible possibility began forming. Arthur hadn't left Blackwood Manor. Arthur had never been allowed to. The realization haunted me, and apparently it haunted him too. That night the rain returned. Heavy. Relentless. The city vanished behind sheets of water. Around 2 in the morning, I woke suddenly. The apartment was silent. Too silent. Then I noticed something strange. A faint glow downstairs. Coming from the studio. My stomach tightened. I knew I had turned everything off. Slowly, I descended the staircase. Each step creaked beneath my weight. The glow intensified. Golden, soft, unnatural. The studio door stood partially open. My pulse hammered. I pushed it wider and stopped breathing. The computer monitor was on. The photograph filled the screen. But that wasn't what terrified me. The photograph should have been on the computer. Instead, a printed copy rested on my desk. Waiting. Someone had placed it there. Carefully. Deliberately. The image looked different again. Much different. The Blackwood family remained frozen in place. The manor still stood behind them. But Arthur Finch was gone. Not hidden. Not faded. Gone. I stared at the empty photograph. Confused. Terrified. Then a movement reflected faintly in the dark computer screen. Behind me. I turned slowly. Every instinct screamed at me not to. But I turned anyway. And there, standing silently in the corner of my studio, was Arthur Finch. Not inside a photograph. Not behind glass. Standing in the room. Watching me. Exactly as he had watched from that window in 1926. Arthur Finch stood silently in the corner of my studio. For several seconds, neither of us moved. The rain continued, striking the windows. The clock ticked softly on the wall, and somewhere beyond the fog-covered streets of Edinburgh, life carried on exactly as it always had. Yet inside that room, reality had changed forever. I should have been terrified. Perhaps part of me was. But another feeling quickly replaced the fear. Sadness. The same sadness I had seen in his eyes from the beginning. Arthur looked exactly as he had inside the photograph. His clothes were worn, his face pale, his expression weary. Not the weariness of a long day, the weariness of a very long wait. For years after Clara died, I had become familiar with that kind of exhaustion. The exhaustion that grief creates. The exhaustion of carrying unfinished things. Arthur knew that feeling too. I could see it. His eyes shifted toward the photograph lying on my desk, then back to me. Slowly he raised one hand, not threateningly, pointing, toward the photograph, toward Blackwood Manor. Then he vanished. No dramatic flash, no sound. One moment, he stood there. The next, the corner was empty. I remained frozen for a long time, staring, listening, waiting. Nothing happened. Eventually I approached the desk. The photograph remained unchanged. The Blackwood family. The manor. An empty garden. Arthur was gone. Yet somehow I understood. He wasn't trying to frighten me. He wanted me to follow. The following morning I drove north. Blackwood Manor still existed. Abandoned now. Forgotten. Like so many old estates scattered across the Scottish countryside. The journey took several hours. Rain followed me most of the way. By afternoon, the manor appeared beyond a line of dead trees. Even after nearly a century, it remained imposing. Dark stone walls, broken windows, ivy covering entire sections of the building. The house looked less like architecture and more like memory, a wounded memory. The iron gates hung crookedly. The front doors stood partially open. Nobody had lived there for decades. Yet, as I stepped inside, I felt watched, not by something evil, by history itself. Dust coated every surface. Silence filled every corridor. My footsteps echoed through enormous rooms. The manor felt frozen, as though time had simply stopped in 1926 and never resumed. For hours I searched. The library, the servant quarters, the attic. Nothing. No evidence. No answers. By evening, frustration had replaced hope. Perhaps I had misunderstood Arthur's message. Perhaps there was nothing left to find. Then I remembered Eleanor Blackwood's diary. The torn pages, the shouting in the cellar. My pulse quickened. The cellar. A narrow staircase descended beneath the house. The air grew colder with every step. The stone walls sweated moisture. Darkness seemed thicker underground. Eventually I reached a large storage chamber. Empty shelves lined the walls. Broken crates lay scattered across the floor. At first glance, nothing appeared unusual. Then I noticed a section of stonework near the back wall. Different from the rest. Newer, or rather less old. Someone had sealed something. For nearly an hour, I worked, removing loose stones, clearing debris. My hands bled. My muscles ached. Then the wall finally gave way. A hidden room waited beyond. The smell hit me first. Old air, dust, decay. My flashlight revealed shelves, boxes, documents, and bones. Human bones. Several of them. I staggered backward. My stomach twisted violently. The room remained untouched for nearly a century. Whatever secrets the Blackwoods buried here had never been meant to see daylight again. Carefully, I examined the contents. Ledgers, letters, financial records, personal journals. The truth emerged piece by piece, and it was monstrous. The Blackwoods were not merely wealthy. They were cruel. They exploited workers, silenced witnesses, destroyed lives. Anyone who threatened the family's reputation disappeared. Arthur Finch had discovered evidence. He intended to expose them. For that reason, he never left the manor alive. One journal contained a confession, written by the Blackwood patriarch himself. Cold, matter of fact. Without remorse, Arthur had been murdered, his body hidden beneath the cellar, his existence erased. The room spun around me. 99 years. 99 years without justice. 99 years trapped inside a photograph, waiting for someone to find the truth, waiting for someone to listen. By the time authorities arrived, darkness had fallen. The investigation lasted months. The discovery became national news. Historians descended upon Blackwood Manor. Journalists uncovered decades of corruption. Families finally learned what happened to missing relatives. Victims received names, stories, dignity. Arthur Finch became more than a forgotten servant. He became a man. A real man. A man who had tried to do the right thing. The dead deserved that much. When everything was finally over, winter returned to Edinburgh. The city disappeared beneath fog once again. Life slowly resumed. My studio reopened. Customers returned. Photographs filled my days. Yet something inside me had changed. The emptiness Clara left behind no longer felt quite as heavy. Not gone, never gone, but lighter, as though helping Arthur had reminded me that grief was not only about loss. Sometimes it was about remembrance. One snowy evening, several months later, I received a letter. Inside was a newspaper clipping. The headline announced the official identification and burial of Arthur Finch. The article ended with a simple sentence. At last, he has been laid to rest. I smiled. For the first time in a very long while. That night after closing the studio, I opened the Blackwood photograph one final time. The image appeared immediately. The family stood before the manor, frozen forever in 1926. The garden behind them was empty. Arthur was gone. Completely. No shadow. No figure. No movement. Only silence. Only peace. I stared at the photograph for several minutes. Then, something caught my eye. A detail I had never noticed before. Near the edge of the image, partially hidden by sunlight, A woman. My breath caught. The photograph should not have contained her. Could not have contained her. Yet there she stood, clear as day. Clara. My Clara. The same smile from the silver frame. The same warmth. The same kindness in her eyes. Tears blurred my vision instantly. I leaned closer, unable to believe what I was seeing. Beside her appeared a line of faint handwriting. Not printed, not part of the original image. A message. Simple. Beautiful. Thank you for helping him find peace. My hands trembled. I touched the screen, foolishly, as though somehow I could reach through it. The image remained unchanged. Clara continued smiling. For years after her death, I had searched for signs, dreams, coincidences, anything. Most brought only disappointment. Yet now, sitting alone in a quiet studio while snow drifted outside, I felt something I had not felt since losing her. Not certainty, not proof. Something better. Comfort. The kind that arrives unexpectedly. The kind that asks nothing from you. The kind that simply sits beside your grief until it becomes bearable. Outside church bells echoed across Edinburgh. The city glowed beneath falling snow. I looked once more at Clara's face, then gently closed the file. When I stood to leave, I paused before the silver frame on my desk. The familiar ritual waited. The same words I had spoken every night for 3 years. Only this time they felt different. Not painful, not lonely, just honest. I smiled and whispered softly, "Good night, love." For the first time since she died, I thought she might have heard me.